Hi everyone, this video is on how to build your own solar panel. And now I'm not an expert at building these panels. I have built 4 of them so far, and every time you build a panel it seems to get a lot easier. They're not that hard to build, so I'm just going to show you how to put them together. And there's lots of ways of building these. You don't have to do it this way, but this is one of the easiest ways I've found so far. So first of all, I'm going to start off with what makes up the solar panel. Now in my hand here I have a solar cell, and the solar cell has 2 sides. We have a front, which is the sunny side. This is the top side of the cell. And then we have the back side of the cell, which is the positive side, and this is the negative side. Now I'm going to talk about how these are wired and how you join these together. So the cells I used in my panels are a 6-inch cell, and they're rated at 4 watts each, and they're half a volt. Now these cells are wired in a series circuit to add up the voltage that's required. Now the cells I'm going to be working with on this panel here are, their cells have been cut out of a group of cells. So they have the tabbing wire on them, but they've been cut a little short, but you can just solder them to the next cell. And I recommend using a cell like this or a pre-tab cell, which the pre-tab cells come with the tabbing wire already extended on them, and then all you have to do is just continue soldering them together. Now first thing, when you get your cells, you have to be very careful handling them, and they're very delicate and they'll crack very easily. So you have to handle them carefully. Try not to get too many fingerprints on the sunny side of the cell. The back side really doesn't matter. So what you're going to want to do is work on a nice surface, flat surface. I recommend glass, because the glass itself actually helps as a heat sink to dissipate heat when you're soldering the actual tabbing wires. So, and the piece of glass is smooth and it's flat, so you won't crack the cell. You don't have an uneven surface. So the best thing is to use glass, and you can see how easily you can move them around on the glass. Now the first thing you're going to do when building a solar panel is you're going to want to determine how many cells you're going to get onto your piece of glass. This is just a random piece of glass I had, and I've been using most of the panels I've been building of just with glass that I actually already had laying around. So I haven't purchased any glass. Now if you have some old scrap glass laying around, 2 pieces that are the same size, then you can build a solar panel out of this. And the first thing you're going to do is want to determine how many cells you can get onto this frame, this glass panel. So the simple way is to just lay them out, and then you can determine how many per row that you can get onto here. And I can see here that I can get 4 per row. So I get 4 cells per row onto this piece of glass. And then if I go this way, I can get another 4. So in total, I'm going to have 16 cells on this piece of glass. Tools that I use when building my homemade panels. The first thing is a soldering iron. You're going to need a soldering iron. This one here is 45 watts. And that seems to be a perfect amount of heat that I find when putting these cells together. Also, you're going to need some side cutters to cut your bus bar and your tabbing wire. Also, maybe some scissors if you're cutting tape and whatnot. Also, you'll need a brush. This is handy because you can use this to hold down contact areas when you're soldering them. And also you're going to be using the brush to brush flux if you need to resolder a tab. And also if you don't want to hold the tabs by hand, you can use a clamp like this one, and you can just clamp the tab to the glass, Also, I have a weight here. This is just a capacitor. It's not that heavy. It's about maybe half a pound or so. Also, you'll need a caulking gun. Materials, the first thing is you're going to need solder. And this is just a resin core solder I'm using. But you can use a silver solder or a lead-free solder. It doesn't matter as long as it's for electrical. And also, you may need some flux and a small brush. Now, the flux is used to put on the solar cell before you tab. Now, some of the cells you may have to re-tab, so you're going to need to apply this. I'll show that in joining this type of cell together. Now, I'm just going to take a cell here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder them from the positive side, the back side of the cell, because if you get resin and solder on the sunny side, you're going to lower its efficiency. So you might as well solder it from the back side as much as possible. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cell and I'm just going to flip it over. And these here are the positive wires, the positive tapping wires. So I'm just going to make sure that they're straight, which they are. And then I can take another cell here, and if you look at the cell, you'll see that this wire here is the negative wire, and it's going to be laid on top of these ones and then soldered. Flip this over now and lay it on top of these positive wires. Line it up, and then you can take a weight and you can just put that, and then you can just take your iron and you can just then apply a little solder right to the joint, like that. And we'll do another one. Now, once you've got to the end of your row, then you're going to have to extend the tapping wire out, because these have been cut too short, so you're going to have to extend them. So all you have to do is take your tapping wire, and then you can extend these, and it's very simple. You can apply a little solder. Flatten out your tapping wire. And just lay it over top. Leave a ½ inch extend it out, and then just. Now, if you're not using a weight, it'll start getting pretty hot on you. But you can see how it just flows. If you keep your finger far enough back, you can take the heat. So we'll do another joint here, and this one's just holding it with a weight. And this one, if your iron isn't really that hot, what you can do is you can apply a little bit of solder, and it'll get the flow going right away, and then you can just go along, and there we go. It's completely soldered down. So when you're done reconnecting your cells into the specific rows you're going to be using, and on this panel here I'm going to have 4 per row, and I'm going to have 4 rows that will fit this piece of glass. I'm limited to the size of the glass. So what I'm going to do before I move them, the best thing to do is to tape them, and this makes them a little stronger. It reinforces while moving them. You can move them without taping them, but if you let them bend in any way, they'll crack, unfortunately. So what you're going to do is just drop the tape down just loosely, no tension, flat down onto the cell. Do not try to change. If the tape sticks down wrong, just leave it, because if you try to pull it off the cell, it'll crack the cell. And then you can just press that down really lightly. You'll see the tape adhering to the cell. You'll see it sticking there. And just take another piece of tape, lay it down, and this will reinforce the cell when you're going to move it around. So if you catch a fracture, tape it right away. Get it right away, because then it will spread and you'll lose the whole corner. So I'm just going to lay some tape on here. And like that. And there we go. So now that's not going to continue on and crack off. And the only reason I do that is because cosmetically, for one reason, because it you know, people look at your panel and they say, "Oh, look at that, it's cracked." They're going to see that right away on your homemade panel. So that's something you don't want. And also, if you keep this from cracking off completely, this piece will still work. It'll still function on this cell. And don't worry if you do crack a piece off or you crack the whole cell, as long as these contacts are connected to each other and they're continuing the series circuit, then the panel will work. Now, when picking up your row of cells, when they're soldered like this, they're not like what you see in some videos where you can just lift the whole thing up and it folds like an accordion. Now, the reason for that is because there isn't enough tabbing wire in here to allow that flex for the wire to actually bend, and also because of the solder on the wire itself, it's made it then rigid and solid. So when you go to pick this thing up, it then cracks these cells. This is what I learned right away when I built my first panel, when I went to move the whole array. And I didn't totally crack one, but I could hear it cracking. And so what you want to do is you want to move this very carefully without letting these fold, like sag. You don't want any sagging when you go to lift these. So the best way is to grab it. There's a few different ways. You could scoop it up with some wax paper, or you could grab it like this is what I do, and just slightly pull up, and then I put a little tension between the cells, and then just turn. And then once you get it on its side, you can move them easily when they're on their side. It's easy to move them around, or when they're vertical, then you can easily move them around just with one finger. But it's very hard to pick them up when they're like this. So if you apply a little bit of pressure between the tabbed areas, and you just pull apart slightly, very little bit of pressure to keep them straight, then you can lower them down and then gently lay them on. You can take your voltage meter and you can test to see if you have this thing connected right. So on this side here, I should have a positive on this side and a negative. We'll just test it. Now, I don't have a light over top, so it's not going to be... So what you can do is you can test between each cell. So this is one cell, so this is 42 millivolts. Then you can move on to the next one, 42, so, or 40, so that's good. If you see equal numbers, see, they're all equal. So if you see equal numbers, then you know, and it all adds up when you test between them all, then you know that the cells are working. And some people do test them under bright light to make sure that they're fully functioning, but I haven't had a problem yet with my panels. They all seem to have the full voltage they're supposed to have. Now when you're done soldering all your rows together of cells, then you're going to lay them onto your piece of glass you're using. Now this particular panel, I'm just using an old piece of glass from a storm window, and it actually has aluminum frame. This will be the first panel I've built with this type of glass. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how you have to line up your rows of cells. Now this row here, this one here would be the positive, because this tab wire is on the bottom of the cell. So you know on this side is positive, and you know when you come down to here, you're negative on the sunny side. So your next row beside this one is going to be a positive, because you're going to go from negative on the top of this sunny side cell over to this positive here on the bottom. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach those together with the bus bar wire, and that will then continue our circuit across these rows of cells. And then when I come, the next one I'm going to do, so I'm going to solder on a bus bar from this tab over to this tab, and then when I go over here, I have a negative. Now this negative is going to be connected to this positive here on this row. So when these are attached together from here to here, then I'm going to go back down to here, and I'm going to connect another bus bar across from this row of cells over to this row. So in the end, I'm going to have my negative here on this cell, and I'm going to have my positive here. And that will complete the entire series circuit of this. So you'll think of it like this. You're going to come up this way, come down, and then you're going to go up again, and then you're going to come down, and then you're going to come up, and you're going to end here. So in the end, you're going to have your two contacts here and here. So now I've spaced the rows with a slight gap from the side here, and also a slight gap down the middle between the rows of cells. I'm just going to stick down the bus bars here in certain spots, and then I'm going to go and solder the top there. And this will keep the cells from moving around. Once you've stuck this down, you can actually move the whole panel. Once you've stuck all the bus bars down, you can move this panel even on its side. So cut your length of wire that you want. And then what you're going to do is just have the cells lined up. And you're just going to take these little tabbing wires, and you're just going to solder them to the bus bars. And this is pretty easy. So what you do is you take your iron and some solder. So I've just soldered on all the bus bars, and they're continuing my series circuit here. And I've also soldered on the terminals that are going to come out of the panel. So they'll be the positive and negative terminals. So they'll just be folded down, and then some silicone will go underneath. And also, because this frame is aluminum, I'm going to have to put an insulator or some black tape or something. Unlike the glass, I'm going to have to do something with that so this doesn't short out. And what I've done is I've just stuck the double backing tape down with the wax paper still up, and I'm going to put another layer on top of these, and that will give me a little space to keep the glass spaced away from the cells. And also I use some aluminum tape just to stick down where I'm going to put some silicone. And I'm just experimenting with different materials to see which ones last the longest and which ones work the best. So and also I'm gonna put these little spacers here in between instead of using silicone, because the silicone may react with the cells. So I'm gonna use these instead on this panel. On my other panels I just put globs of silicone, but so I'm just going to put these little spacers in between the glass here, and this will stop the glass in the center, if any pressure is pushed down, from contacting these cells and breaking them. So because they're a little too big, so I'm just going to cut them, cut off the edges here, and then I'm going to glue them on with some, I'm just using here some contact cement. It seems to work okay, so I'm going to see how long that lasts. And I'm just going to put a little bit on one side of this thing and stick it down to the glass. And then when I put my silicone around the frame, I will then lower the glass down onto the frame, and these little things will stop any movement. And also the double backing tape will bond to the glass and hold the glass also in place. But because the sun is going to be on this, this tape may degrade. So I'm also going to put some silicone where this aluminum tape is. Now it's time to seal in the cells and put the top glass on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a few blobs of silicone in between the cells here, just to allow just a couple little blobs, and this will just make sure that when the silicone hardens up, then the glass in the center won't push down and break the cells, because the double backing tape may just disintegrate in the sun. So you want to have a backup for that. Now I'm ready to apply the silicone around the glass. So I'll just take the caulking gun and run a bead around the perimeter of the frame. About a 1/4 inch bead is fine, thickness, and just go along the entire glass surface. And when you come up to one of these here, I want to make sure you can see this. What you can do is put a little sealant underneath to make sure, and then squish it down, and then put your sealant on top. And this will make sure that it's sealed. And just continue your bead around the perimeter of the glass. It doesn't matter how how neatly you apply this. The objective is just to try to get a good seal on it. So I'm going to continue with that, and I'm going to leave a gap. And the reason for that is to allow, I'm going to leave a gap just in here somewhere, just to allow the silicone gas to escape from the actual frame. So I'll let it set overnight, and then the gases will hopefully be released then, and then I can just seal up the little hole that'll be left. So I'm going to continue sealing this and then put the glass on. So the silicone is around the entire glass, and I have a little gap here. And I'm just going to take the glass now and pick up the glass and bring it over. And what I want to do is I want to lay it on top as carefully as possible. I want to get it perfectly lined up over the actual frame, because you don't really want to move this once you've got it set in place. So just drop it down very carefully once you get it lined up, and that was pretty good. And you can then press it down slightly. You can see that the actual tape is starting to adhere. So you can see that the double backing tape has made contact with the surface glass. So I've just lightly pressed the glass down against the double backing tape. And you don't want to press this down very much. You want to keep this gap here all the way around the two panes of glass. So you can see how the silicone is then sealing the two pieces of glass together. So I've just stripped the wires back, and I haven't twisted them because they solder better when they're just in strands. And I'm going to select the black wire for my negative, so that'll be this contact right here. So all you have to do is just wrap this wire around the bus bar wire and just wrap it around a few times like that, and then take your soldering iron and some solder. This contact you want to heat up and make a nice solder joint here. Just apply the solder. Once the solder starts flowing, then you'll get a nice weld, a nice solder. That one's fully soldered, and then I'm just going to solder the other one on. So after the wire's been soldered on, this has got to be sealed up. So I'm just going to use some silicone and just put some silicone underneath of the bus bar wire. And just put a little bit on top as well. Well, these are just a few of the homemade panels I've made so far, and I'm going to keep building them, and once I get better, I'll post some more videos on how to build them a lot quicker and more efficiently. Well, thank you for watching.